The cosmic highway stretched beyond comprehension, a ribbon of faint starlight woven through an infinite tapestry of darkness. Here, between the nebulae and the uncharted black, loneliness was a constant companion, a silent passenger in every vessel that dared to traverse its vast, unfeeling expanse. It was a future where humanity, having exploded across the stars, still grappled with the inherent solitude of existence, its triumphs often overshadowed by the sheer, overwhelming scale of the universe. This desolate stretch of space, far from the glittering core worlds, was Cale's domain, a veteran trucker whose life was an endless series of jump coordinates and cargo manifests, a routine so ingrained it felt like fate. Cale, a man forged from years of interstellar grit, his face a roadmap of fine lines etched by countless light years and the glow of console screens, was nearing 50. His movements were economic, his gaze distant, the hum of his massive cargo ship, the Stardust Drifter, a constant, droning lullaby. He was a stoic sentinel of the void, hauling everything from refined ore to luxury star yachts, his only true confidant the quiet whir of his ship's auxiliary systems. In this human-first future, the galaxy was a complicated place, filled with both known and unknown wonders, but Cale's world was a much simpler equation: pick up, deliver, repeat. He just completed a particularly arduous run to a remote, barely charted system, a mining outpost that felt like the edge of creation itself, offloading a mountain of industrial machinery destined for their deep crust processing plants. Now, with the last automated claw retracted, the cavernous cargo bay of the Drifter felt unusually hollow, echoing with the silence of departure. Cale began his final pre-warp check, a tedious but utterly essential ritual. He moved with practiced ease through the vast chamber, his heavy boots clonking rhythmically on the reinforced deck plating, the beam of his utility light cutting through the residual dust motes dancing in the dim, emergency lighting. Each panel, each locking clamp, each structural beam received his expert scrutiny. It was the same inspection he performed thousands of times, a mundane dance of responsibility and caution. Then a sound. It was faint, almost imperceptible over the distant thrum of the ship's cooling systems, but it was there. A soft, high-pitched whimpering, entirely out of place in the cold, metallic void of his empty trailer. Cale paused, his brow furrowing. He cycled through the internal comms, checking for any anomalies, but the ship's diagnostics reported nothing. The whimpering came again, a fragile, trembling sound that seemed to emanate from the shadowed recesses of the cargo bay's far end. Disbelief warred with a flicker of annoyance. A loose panel, perhaps, or some residual vibration he hadn't accounted for. But the sound was too organic, too alive. His initial irritation quickly morphed into a cautious curiosity, a prickle of unease rippling through his seasoned nerves. No living being should be in his cargo bay. Not after he'd personally overseen the offloading, not after his meticulous scans had come up clean. He tightened his grip on the utility light, its beam now a steady, focused spear. For a fleeting moment, he envisioned a small, furry creature, a stray space rat perhaps, or a malfunctioning piece of equipment producing some kind of audio feedback. Whatever it was, it needed to be dealt with before he initiated the jump sequence. He took a slow, deliberate breath, the heavy silence of the empty bay now punctuated only by that soft, persistent cry. This routine haul, it seemed, was about to shatter in an entirely unexpected way. For more epic space tales and thrilling adventures like Cale's, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your subscription helps us bring more stories from the boundless cosmos right to you. Cale advanced cautiously, the beam of his utility light cutting a path through the gloom. The whimpering sound grew louder, more distinct now, guiding him deeper into the cavernous bay. It was definitely biological, undeniably distressed. He moved past stacks of deflated cargo bladders and discarded strapping, the metallic tang of recycled air filling his nostrils. The sound pulled him towards a shadowed corner, a space usually reserved for emergency gear, now partially obscured by a cascade of residual dust and forgotten packing materials from the last delivery. His heart hammered a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. This was beyond a stray critter. This was something else entirely. He rounded a particularly large, empty crate, his light sweeping across the floor, and there it was. Huddled amongst the detritus, a tiny, fragile figure, unlike anything he had ever encountered. It was a xenomorphic child, small enough to fit easily in his arms, curled into a tight ball, trembling violently. Its skin, a delicate, almost translucent jade, seemed to emit a soft, internal luminescence that pulsed faintly with every sob. Large, obsidian-like eyes, rimmed with a faint golden glow, were wide and filled with shimmering tears, reflecting the beam of his light like twin distant stars. 3 slender, almost prehensile fingers repeatedly wiped at its face, leaving faint, glowing trails. It was a species entirely absent from any galactic database Kale had ever memorized, a living enigma cowering at his feet. Kale stood frozen, his mind struggling to process the impossible sight. His human-first upbringing, instilled from childhood, emphasized caution and self-reliance in the face of the unknown, often bordering on suspicion towards non-human species. Yet, looking at this small, utterly vulnerable creature, an unexpected, unfamiliar pang of empathy pierced through his hardened exterior. The child was clearly lost, terrified, and utterly alone, a profound sense of helplessness radiating from its tiny form. He noted the intricate, almost floral patterns etched onto its delicate limbs, a natural marking perhaps, or something more. Its physiology was fragile, almost impossibly so, suggesting a world far gentler than the unforgiving vacuum of space. Then the harsh realities of his situation slammed into him. The galaxy was a dangerous place, unforgiving to the lost and the unprotected. And he, Kale, a simple freighter pilot, was now harboring an undocumented alien. Not just an alien, but a child. The strict interspecies protocols, the myriad regulations governing interstellar travel, the sheer legality and danger of this discovery, flooded his mind. He was risking everything: his ship, his license, his freedom. He could already picture the sterile interrogation rooms, the bureaucratic nightmares, the inevitable forced separation. This child, despite its innocence, represented an unimaginable obstacle, an antagonist to his solitary, law-abiding existence. Slowly, deliberately, Kale lowered himself to one knee, trying to appear less imposing. He kept his voice low, a gentle rumble in the vast silence, hoping to convey reassurance despite the obvious language barrier. "Hey there," he murmured, his voice a little hoarser than usual. "It's all right. You're safe." He extended a calloused hand, palm open and empty, a universal sign of peace, watching for any reaction. The child flinched, drawing back further into itself, its luminous skin dimming slightly with renewed fear. But Kale remained still, his hand outstretched, his gaze steady and calm. He waited patiently, his own breath held. After a long moment, the small alien girl slowly, hesitantly uncurled. Her large, tear-filled eyes fixated on his offered hand, then on his face, searching for any sign of threat. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, she extended her own tiny, 3-fingered hand, reaching out to touch his. It was a gesture of tentative trust, a delicate bridge built across an impossible divide. Her delicate fingertips, surprisingly warm, brushed against Kale's weathered palm for a fleeting instant before she recoiled slightly, her large eyes still wide with a mixture of fear and burgeoning curiosity. Kale gently withdrew his hand, understanding the need for space, for reassurance. He reached into a utility pouch on his belt, retrieving a compressed ration bar, a bland but energy-rich staple, usually reserved for his own deep space emergencies. He unwrapped it slowly, holding it out. Then, from a built-in dispenser, he filled a small, collapsible cup with water, clear and cool, offering that too. The child's gaze fixated on the bar, then the water. Her small nostrils flared, taking in the scent. With a renewed, albeit hesitant, trust, she reached out, snatching the bar and bringing it to her mouth. She devoured it ravenously, small, sharp teeth tearing into the synthetic nutrients, followed by gulps of water that seemed to vanish instantly. This immediate, desperate consumption spoke volumes, confirming Kale's suspicion of prolonged privation. This wasn't just a lost child, this was a starving one. As she ate, he observed her more closely, the soft luminescent glow of her skin now steadier, less prone to flickering. He noticed the peculiar markings on her delicate limbs and torso, intricate patterns that seemed to shift with the light, almost like living tribal tattoos. They hinted at a distinct culture, a world far removed from his own. Looking at her, a strange, unexpected feeling stirred within him, a warmth he hadn't known his solitary heart could contain. It was a sense of responsibility, a paternal instinct he never knew he possessed, blossoming in the sterile confines of his cargo bay. Cale's mind raced, calculating the immediate danger. She was far from any known home world, likely abandoned or lost, adrift in a universe that held little compassion for the vulnerable. The harsh realities of space travel, the unforgiving authorities, the potential for exploitation by those who preyed on the unique, all these threats converged on this small, fragile being. He thought of humanity's often complicated history with emergent alien civilizations, sometimes curious, often exploitative, sometimes dismissive. His HFY upbringing, while emphasizing human resilience and ingenuity, also carried the subtle undertone of species centricity, a cautious approach to the other. He was acutely aware of the potential for prejudice, the instinct to categorize and control, that lay just beneath the veneer of galactic order. The child, now sated, began to relax. The faint shivers subsided, and the luminescence of her skin pulsed with a softer, more contented rhythm. Her large, obsidian eyes, still brimming with a residual sadness, were now fixed solely on Cale, a silent plea, an unspoken question. She tentatively pointed a small, three-fingered hand towards his face, then to herself, making a soft, melodic sound, a questioning hum that resonated with a quiet curiosity. Cale understood. She was asking for names, for identity. His internal conflict was sudden and overwhelming. His duty, his ingrained programming as a space trucker, screamed at him to report this anomaly, to follow protocol, to hand her over to the appropriate authorities who would undoubtedly process her, catalog her, and send her to some interspecies holding facility. But the sight of her, small and trusting, the memory of her ravenous hunger, the profound loneliness in her eyes, ignited a powerful, protective urge. He couldn't. He simply could not turn her over to a system that would see her as a specimen, not a child. His solitary life, once a comfortable, albeit empty, existence, now felt less barren, less vast. A profound, almost spiritual connection had been forged in the silence of his cargo bay. This tiny, vulnerable alien had awakened something deep within him, something he hadn't realized was dormant. He would protect her, no matter the cost. His decision was made, etched into his very soul. His decision was made, etched into his very soul. Cale, grappling with the profound shift in his reality, realized the first step was communication. He pointed to his chest, a gesture he hoped was universal, and in a voice still rough with emotion, enunciated clearly. Cale. The small alien child watched his mouth, her head tilted, her large eyes studying his features. She mimicked the sound, a soft, almost imperceptible Cale. Then, with a new gesture, pointed one of her 3 fingers at herself. A series of soft, melodious syllables, like wind chimes played by a gentle breeze, flowed from her lips. It wasn't a name Cale could hope to pronounce, nor one he recognized. Lyra, he decided, simplifying the complex alien sounds into something he could grasp. A name that evoked the delicate beauty of scattered starlight, a name that felt right for this fragile being. He repeated it, and her luminous eyes seemed to brighten in recognition. As Lyra softly repeated her new, human-given name, Cale sensed a flicker, a brief flash of raw, unfiltered memory from her. It wasn't through words, but an almost telepathic impression, a cascade of fragmented images, blinding, chaotic lights, the cacophony of screeching metal, the searing heat of explosions, the terrified, echoing cries of what he instinctively perceived as her family or caretakers, and then, a wrenching, agonizing separation. It was a silent, emotional communication of profound trauma, a silent scream of loss that resonated deep within Cale's own long-buried pains. He felt a fierce, primal surge of protectiveness. There was no going back now. He couldn't turn her over. He wouldn't. His immediate priority shifted from understanding her past to securing her future, however uncertain. He had to protect her, hide her from the prying eyes of galactic authorities, from the cold efficiency of scans, from the casual cruelty of those who wouldn't see the child, only the alien. His large cargo ship, designed for inanimate freight, now needed to become a sanctuary. He designated a small, unused utility compartment near his personal living quarters as her temporary haven. It was cramped, certainly, but it was secure, out of the way, and crucially off the main sensor grid. Cale moved with a newfound urgent purpose. He meticulously cleaned the small space, wiping down every surface, ensuring there were no sharp edges or potential hazards. From a supply locker, he pulled out spare maintenance fabrics, soft and thick, enough to fashion a rudimentary bed, a small nest where she could feel safe. He retrieved emergency rations, easy to consume and nutritious, along with a sealed water dispenser. The compartment was naturally dark, so he installed a small, muted light source, adjustable to a gentle glow, so she wouldn't be plunged into total darkness. He even found an old, worn comlink unit, dismantled it, and repurposed its small speaker to play a soft, low hum, mimicking the distant thrum of the ship's engines, hoping it would be a comforting, familiar sound. As he prepared her hiding spot, the full weight of his decision settled upon Cale. He was breaking countless galactic laws, defying protocols that had governed his life for decades. He was risking his career, his hard-earned freedom, and potentially his very life. The thought of the repercussions, the cold judgment of the system, sent a shiver down his spine. Yet, as he glanced at Lyra, who was watching his every move with an innocent, trusting gaze, a small, fragile hand instinctively reaching for him, he knew he couldn't regret it. The warmth he felt, the sudden, undeniable pull to protect this tiny creature, transcended all logic, all fear. He was no longer just Cale, the lonely space trucker. He was her protector, her silent guardian, her only hope in this vast, indifferent galaxy. The emptiness he had carried for so long was slowly, tentatively, being filled by this small, jade-skinned alien child he now called Lyra. His decision was made, etched into his very soul. Cale, grappling with the profound shift in his reality, realized the first step was communication. He pointed to his chest, a gesture he hoped was universal, and in a voice still rough with emotion, enunciated clearly. Cale. The small alien child watched his mouth, her head tilted, her large eyes studying his features. She mimicked the sound, a soft, almost imperceptible Cale. Then, with a new gesture, pointed one of her 3 fingers at herself. A series of soft, melodious syllables, like wind chimes played by a gentle breeze, flowed from her lips. It wasn't a name Cale could hope to pronounce, nor one he recognized. Lyra, he decided, simplifying the complex alien sounds into something he could grasp, a name that evoked the delicate beauty of scattered starlight, a name that felt right for this fragile being. He repeated it, and her luminous eyes seemed to brighten in recognition. As Lyra softly repeated her new, human-given name, Cale sensed a flicker, a brief flash of raw, unfiltered memory from her. It wasn't through words, but an almost telepathic impression, a cascade of fragmented images, blinding, chaotic lights, the cacophony of screeching metal, the searing heat of explosions, the terrified, echoing cries of what he instinctively perceived as her family or caretakers, and then, a wrenching, agonizing separation. It was a silent, emotional communication of profound trauma, a silent scream of loss that resonated deep within Cale's own long-buried pains. He felt a fierce, primal surge of protectiveness. There was no going back now. He couldn't turn her over, he wouldn't. His immediate priority shifted from understanding her past to securing her future, however uncertain. He had to protect her, hide her from the prying eyes of galactic authorities, from the cold efficiency of scans, from the casual cruelty of those who wouldn't see the child, only the alien. His large cargo ship, designed for inanimate freight, now needed to become a sanctuary. He designated a small, unused utility compartment near his personal living quarters as her temporary haven. It was cramped, certainly, but it was secure, out of the way, and crucially off the main sensor grid. Cale moved with a newfound urgent purpose. He meticulously cleaned the small space, wiping down every surface, ensuring there were no sharp edges or potential hazards. From a supply locker, he pulled out spare maintenance fabrics, soft and thick, enough to fashion a rudimentary bed, a small nest where she could feel safe. He retrieved emergency rations, easy to consume and nutritious, along with a sealed water dispenser. The compartment was naturally dark, so he installed a small, muted light source, adjustable to a gentle glow, so she wouldn't be plunged into total darkness. He even found an old, worn comlink unit, dismantled it, and repurposed its small speaker to play a soft, low hum, mimicking the distant thrum of the ship's engines, hoping it would be a comforting, familiar sound. As he prepared her hiding spot, the full weight of his decision settled upon Cale. He was breaking countless galactic laws, defying protocols that had governed his life for decades. He was risking his career, his hard-earned freedom, and potentially his very life. The thought of the repercussions, the cold judgment of the system, sent a shiver down his spine. Yet, as he glanced at Lyra, who was watching his every move with an innocent, trusting gaze, a small, fragile hand instinctively reaching for him, he knew he couldn't regret it. The warmth he felt, the sudden, undeniable pull to protect this tiny creature, transcended all logic, all fear. He was no longer just Cale, the lonely space trucker. He was her protector, her silent guardian, her only hope in this vast, indifferent galaxy. The emptiness he had carried for so long was slowly, tentatively, being filled by this small, jade-skinned alien child he now called Lyra. The Stardust Drifter shuddered as Cale initiated the jump sequence, the familiar lurch preceding the blinding flash of warp drive engaging. He was heading for Xylos, a bustling human-dominated hub world, a place known for its stringent immigration checkpoints and meticulous customs officers. The stakes, already immeasurable, now felt impossibly high. Lyra, nestled deep within her improvised sanctuary, was initially startled by the ship's powerful vibrations and the deep, resonant roar of the engines. Cale felt a faint tremor through the deck plating, a sympathetic response from the ship itself to the immense forces at play. He pressed a hand against the wall, a silent reassurance, and imagined Lyra's wide eyes adjusting to the strange new symphony of interstellar travel. Remarkably, Lyra adapted with surprising speed. Cale noticed, through the ship's internal sensors and her subtle reactions during his visits, her unique ability to perceive subtle energy fluctuations. She seemed to instinctively know when the grav generators hummed louder or when the deflectors powered up, almost like a sixth sense. She'd emit soft, inquisitive chirps or her skin's luminescence would brighten slightly, reacting to these changes in the ship's state. It was an intriguing ability, and Cale made a mental note of it, wondering about its origins. He quickly established a clandestine daily routine. During Cale's long shifts on the bridge, Lyra remained hidden, a secret heartbeat within the Drifter's metallic shell. But every break, every moment he could snatch, he would steal away to her compartment. He brought her nutrient pastes, small portions of rehydrated fruits, and fresh water, always mindful of the limited resources. Communication was still primarily through gestures and simple sounds, but Lyra was an eager learner, her luminous eyes tracking his every movement, absorbing every nuance. A growing, unspoken bond began to flourish between them. Lyra started to show clear signs of affection. She would mimic his hand gestures, her small, three-fingered hands clumsily copying his. When he was near, she'd emit soft, contented purring sounds that vibrated through her delicate chest. Sometimes she would simply rest her head against his leg, a gesture of pure, innocent trust that further solidified Cale's protective instincts. The sterile environment of his ship, once so empty, was now infused with a fragile, precious warmth. Then came the first near miss, a heart-stopping moment that underscored the fragility of his secret. They were traversing a desolate sector when a patrol vessel, its origin unknown, initiated a routine deep space scan. Cale felt the telltale energy signature wash over his ship, a common occurrence. But this time, a soft, high-pitched whine emanated from Lyra's compartment, a sound of distress that pierced through the ship's ambient hum. It was faint, but undeniably present, and dangerously close to the audible spectrum of the scanning array. Cale's blood ran cold. He slammed his hand onto the ship's internal audio control, boosting the drifter's own engine noise and life support hum, praying it would mask Lyra's tiny cry. The scan passed, the patrol vessel moving on its way, but Cale was left shaken. He realized the incredible fragility of his secret, the razor-thin margin between safety and catastrophic discovery. His heart pounded, a stark reminder that every light year was a gamble, every moment a potential exposure. The constant fear of discovery, ignited by that near miss, began to gnaw at Cale. His nights, once filled with the deep, uninterrupted sleep of physical exhaustion, now became restless stretches of anxious rumination. He found himself waking abruptly, the imagined blare of an alarm, or the cold metallic click of an inspection team's boots echoing in the silence of his cabin. His concentration, usually laser-sharp for navigation and system checks, was beginning to fray at the edges, replaced by a persistent, background hum of paranoia. Every glint of light on the console, every unexpected chime from a distant sensor, sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He frequently left the bridge, making excuses to check on cargo manifests or run diagnostics, but in reality, he was drawn inexorably to Lyra's hiding spot, needing to see her, to confirm her safety, to reassure himself that his secret remained intact. His concern for her, a protective instinct he never knew he harbored, was rapidly deepening into an almost obsessive vigilance. Despite this mounting psychological strain, Cale found himself continuously surprised by Lyra's resilience and her surprisingly fast learning capabilities. She was a sponge, absorbing information and adapting with an ease that defied her apparent fragility. She quickly picked up on his gestures, anticipating his needs and even responding to simple requests. To his astonishment, she began to mimic a few basic human sounds, her vocalizations melodic and unique, a soft echo of his own words. Her attempts at water, or sleep, were ethereal, like whispered secrets carried on an alien breeze, yet perfectly understandable. These small breakthroughs, these moments of shared communication, were the anchors that kept Cale grounded amidst his growing anxieties. He tried, in his spare moments, to research alien species that might resemble Lyra, poring over his ship's outdated, though extensive, database of known xenofauna. He scanned through biological classifications, morphological markers, and planetary origins, but found no matches. Not even a distant cousin. This complete lack of information only deepened the mystery of her origins, confirming her truly exotic nature and further isolating her. It meant she was either from a ridiculously remote, uncharted sector, or a species so rare it hadn't even been fully documented by the sprawling galactic federations. This absolute uniqueness, while fascinating, also magnified the danger she was in. There would be no existing protocols for her, no established safe havens. Yet, despite the palpable stress, Cale discovered moments of unexpected, profound joy in Lyra's company. Her innocent curiosity was infectious. She found wonder in the simplest things, a flickering indicator light, the gentle sway of the ship, the taste of a new nutrient paste. Her small, three-fingered hand, reaching out to gently touch his beard or trace the worn lines on his palm, brought a warmth to his usually sterile existence that he hadn't known was possible. Her growing trust in him, evident in her bright, luminous eyes, was a beacon in the vast, cold expanse of space. He found himself smiling more, a genuine, unforced smile, something he hadn't done in years. The ship, once a lonely vessel, now felt like a small, secret home for two. However, the logical, pragmatic part of Cale's mind constantly reminded him of the untenable situation. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he couldn't keep Lyra with him indefinitely. The risks were simply too high. Sooner or later, a scan would be too thorough, a customs officer too observant, a space pirate too inquisitive. He couldn't subject her, or himself, to that constant, debilitating danger. He had given her temporary safety, but he yearned for something more permanent, something truly secure. This stark realization forced him to start contemplating a long-term plan, a desperate scheme to get her to a safe haven, a place where she could thrive without fear of discovery, a home where she truly belonged. But the galaxy was vast and unforgiving, and the thought of finding such a place, let alone reaching it, felt like an insurmountable challenge, a decision weighing on his soul with crushing inevitability. The crushing inevitability of his decision loomed large as the Stardust Drifter finally approached Xylos. The vibrant, bustling hub world, a glittering jewel in the darkness, was a stark contrast to the desolate mining platform Kale had recently left. Its orbit was a chaotic ballet of countless vessels, shuttles darting like iridescent insects, massive cargo freighters lumbering towards their docks, and sleek, predatory-looking patrol ships maintaining order. The sheer volume of traffic and the renowned stringency of Xylos's security measures ratcheted Kale's anxiety to an almost unbearable pitch. Every blip on his radar, every flickering data point, felt like a potential threat. Lyra was hidden, but the universe had a cruel way of finding what was lost. The ordeal of Xylos Customs began the moment he entered the planetary approach lane. Kale meticulously recounted his shipping manifest, a perfectly mundane list of machine parts and industrial lubricants, ensuring not a single detail was out of place. He endured the preliminary scans, a cascade of energy signatures washing over the drifter, probing every inch of its hull and cargo bay. Then came the physical inspection, a necessity for all inbound freight. Two grim-faced human customs officers, clad in their pristine white uniforms, boarded his ship. They moved with an almost surgical precision, their eyes missing nothing, their scanners humming quietly as they swept section after section. Kale stood by, outwardly calm, engaging in polite, brief conversation, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. Deep within her concealed compartment, Lyra sensed the intrusion. Kale, attuned to her in a way he couldn't explain, felt her fear, a silent tremor that seemed to ripple through the very metal of the ship. It was a subtle coldness, a tightening in his own chest, a heightened sense of vigilance that screamed danger. He struggled to project an aura of casual indifference, his poker face a mask of practiced stoicism. Every muscle in his body was coiled, ready to react, though he knew any overt movement would only draw suspicion. The officers moved closer to his living quarters, their steps echoing ominously down the corridor. Lyra's fear intensified, a silent, desperate plea reaching him. Then came the second close call, far more terrifying than the first. One of the customs officers, a lean woman with sharp, observant eyes, paused before the bulkhead leading to Lyra's hiding spot. She tapped a finger against the reinforced plasteel, her scanner sweeping the area with deliberate slowness. Kale's breath hitched. His internal sensors showed her hovering just inches from Lyra's location. He felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple, but he maintained his blank expression, forcing himself to breathe evenly. A moment stretched into an eternity. The officer's gaze lingered, her head tilted slightly, as if listening for something beyond human hearing. Kale's heart pounded so violently he feared she could somehow sense it. But then, to his immense, shuddering relief, she shrugged almost imperceptibly, a gesture of dismissiveness, and moved on, finding nothing amiss. Kale breathed a silent, ragged sigh, the tension draining from him in a wave of sudden weakness. Miraculously, he cleared customs. The officers departed, leaving Kale alone in the silent aftermath, the pressure in his chest slowly easing. He piloted the drifter to its designated docking bay, a massive cavern bustling with activity. His immediate obligation was to offload his legitimate cargo, a mountain of industrial machinery currently secured in the main bay. But Lyra was still on board, a secret payload far more precious and perilous. The immense challenge of moving her, a small alien child, off a heavily monitored spaceport without detection, now consumed his thoughts. Where could he take her? Who could he trust? The clock was ticking, and Xylos, with all its bustling lights and watchful eyes, felt less like a sanctuary and more like a cage. With limited time on Xylos, a vibrant, bustling nexus of galactic trade and stringent regulations, Kale felt the crushing weight of Lyra's presence on his ship. He had successfully cleared customs, a minor miracle in itself, but the immediate crisis of her detection was merely postponed. He couldn't risk taking Lyra into the public domain of the spaceport, a labyrinth of watchful eyes, security cameras, and curious beings. Yet leaving her on the drifter, now docked and subject to sporadic security sweeps and maintenance checks, was equally dangerous. He paced his small cabin, the metallic deck cool beneath his worn boots, his mind racing through a meager list of viable, albeit desperate, options. Every scenario he conjured seemed fraught with peril, each path leading to potential discovery and devastating consequences for Lyra. Then, a name surfaced from the dustiest corners of his memory, a relic from his wilder, younger days as a rookie trucker navigating the fringes of galactic law. Jax. An old, retired smuggler, a human who, despite his shady past, was known for an unusual ethical code. He always delivered, and he never asked questions if the pay was right. Jax now operated a legitimate, though discreet, salvage yard on the dim, forgotten outskirts of Xylos, a place where discarded starship husks and forgotten mechanical skeletons gathered dust. He was a man of connections, a shadow broker in the underworld of illicit goods and off-the-books transactions, a silent, no-questions-asked attitude his most valuable commodity. He wasn't exactly a friend, but Cale had done him a few favors in the past, favors that might now be called in. Approaching Jax was a massive gamble. Cale knew it. He'd be exposing himself, crossing lines he hadn't touched in decades. But Lyra's innocent, trusting face flashed in his mind, eclipsing all doubts. He needed help, and Jax was the only name that came to mind, a desperate last resort. Cale began to formulate a vague story, something about sensitive, illicit cargo that needed to be moved off-world without any official record. He would keep Lyra's true nature a secret, of course, spinning a tale of black market tech or rare, untaxed minerals, something valuable enough to pique Jax's interest, but benign enough not to raise too many red flags about living beings. The deception felt distasteful, but necessary. He arranged a meeting through a coded drop point, a system he hadn't used in years. The response was terse, a single coordinate and a time, devoid of pleasantries. Cale made his way to a dimly lit cantina in the lower, grittier levels of the spaceport, a place where the air hung thick with synthetic tobacco smoke and the clatter of dice games. Jax was already there, slumped in a booth, a drink clutched in one hand, his face a roadmap of hard living and countless close calls. His eyes, though weary, were still sharp, missing nothing. Cale slid into the opposite seat, the holographic menu flickering between them. Jax listened intently as Cale pitched his fabricated story, his gaze never leaving Cale's face, searching for any telltale signs of deceit or desperation. He absorbed Cale's vague allusions to sensitive materials and unavoidable complications with a practiced, cynical air. The silence that followed Cale's spiel was long, punctuated only by the low thrum of the cantina's life support. Finally, Jax leaned forward, a grim smile playing on his lips. He agreed to help, but his price, as Cale had anticipated, was steep. "This kind of discretion," Jax rasped, his voice gravelly from years of unregulated atmosphere processors. "It comes at a premium, Cale. A significant portion of your next few hauls. And I mean significant." Cale didn't hesitate. He looked Jax straight in the eye, the weight of Lyra's safety pressing down on him, and without a second thought for his own dwindling finances or future profits, he accepted the terms. He would pay any price. Lyra's safety was paramount. The deal was struck with a firm handshake, a silent acknowledgement of the debt, and the dangerous path they were about to embark upon. Under the cover of Xylos's perpetual twilight, a soft, artificial glow that never truly mimicked natural night, Cale made his move. The harsh, neon-drenched cityscape stretched out around the cargo bay, a dizzying panorama of towering spires and endless traffic lanes. Carefully, he retrieved Lyra from her hiding place, the small utility compartment that had become her temporary world. As he gently lifted her into his arms, Lyra, initially overwhelmed by the cascade of unfamiliar sounds and the barrage of garish lights spilling into the quiet bay, instinctively clung to him. Her tiny, three-fingered hands gripped his jacket, her luminous eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and unwavering trust. The sheer scale and clamor of the spaceport were a stark contrast to the familiar, hushed confines of the Stardust Drifter. A sudden, profound pang of sadness, sharp and unexpected, pierced through Cale. It was an ache he hadn't anticipated, a deep, emotional wound opening at the thought of parting ways with this small, jade-skinned creature who had so unexpectedly woven herself into the fabric of his solitary life. He realized, with a startling clarity, how deeply she had embedded herself in his heart, displacing years of stoic detachment and pragmatic solitude. This little alien, wholly dependent on him, had awakened a dormant part of his soul, a capacity for fierce, unconditional love he hadn't known he possessed. The bustling spaceport faded into a blurry backdrop as all his focus narrowed to the trembling form in his arms. Jax was waiting, as promised. He stood next to a secure, unmarked transport vehicle, its dark plating blending seamlessly into the shadows of the adjacent cargo containers. As Cale approached, Jax's weary eyes, accustomed to processing illicit goods and dodging authority, widened slightly as they landed on Lyra. For a fleeting instant, a flicker of surprise crossed his grizzled features, betraying his stoic demeanor. He hadn't expected a child, let alone an alien one. But he quickly regained his composure, a silent nod acknowledging the gravity of Cale's secret and the immense risk they were both undertaking. Jax understood. He'd seen enough impossible things in his life to recognize when true desperation, or something deeper, was at play. Lyra, sensing the unfamiliar presence of Jax, instinctively shrank back against Cale's chest, her luminous skin dimming slightly. Her grip on Cale's jacket remained firm, a tiny anchor in a sea of overwhelming newness. Cale, feeling her apprehension, gently stroked her head, his touch a silent promise of protection, and murmured a soft, reassuring word in her ear, though he knew she wouldn't understand the language, only the intent. He pressed her closer, a silent shield against the unknown. "All right, Cale," Jax murmured, his voice low and gravelly, cutting through the din of the spaceport. "The plan is simple, but it's got to be executed perfectly." He gestured towards the unmarked transport. "I've got a discreet, off-world sanctuary. A private colony, hidden deep in the Perseus Arm run by an old collective of benevolent ex-smugglers and renegade scientists. The kind who believe in preserving life, not exploiting it. They specialize in protecting unique alien species, especially those with no official designation, or those who've fallen through the cracks of the galactic bureaucracy." A rare, almost gentle expression softened Jax's hardened features. "It's far, Cale. Very far. But it's safe. Truly safe." He opened the transport's rear hatch, revealing a darkened, softly padded interior. A wave of profound relief, mixed with an equally profound sadness, washed over Cale. This was it. This was Lyra's chance. The deal was struck with a firm handshake, a silent acknowledgement of the debt, and the dangerous path they were about to embark upon. It was time. The moment of parting had arrived, a wrenching inevitability that Cale had tried to steel himself against, but which now felt like an impossible chasm opening before him. He knelt down, bringing himself to Lyra's eye level, his gaze locking with her large, luminous eyes. In that silent exchange, he poured all his unspoken promises, all his fierce love and desperate hope for her future. He reached into his pocket, retrieving a small, smooth river stone, worn smooth by countless journeys and years in his hand, his personal good luck charm, a tactile link to home and perseverance. He pressed it gently into her small, three-fingered hand, a silent talisman for her new journey. As Cale prepared to gently hand her over to Jax, to send her towards a life he could only hope would be safe and full of wonder, Lyra looked up at him. Her face, usually so expressive in its silent communication, held a new resolve. Her small hand, still clutching the river stone, reached up. It wasn't to grasp his jacket this time, but to touch his cheek, her delicate fingers surprisingly warm against his weathered skin. Then, with a soft, hesitant voice, a melodic whisper that cut through the spaceport's din, she uttered her first clearly distinct human word. "Dad." The single syllable hung in the crisp, recycled air of the cargo bay, a profound echo in Cale's mind. It was a faint, melodic sound, full of innocence and an unwavering trust that tore through Cale's carefully constructed defenses. It wasn't just a word. It was an unspoken acknowledgement of the fierce, improbable bond they had forged across species and circumstance. The word hit Cale with the force of a physical blow, a wave of profound, overwhelming emotion washing over him. Decades of stoicism, of suppressed feeling, crumbled in an instant. Tears, long suppressed, welled up in his eyes, blurring the neon lights of Xylos into iridescent smears. He pulled her into a tight, raw, primal embrace, burying his face in her soft, glowing hair. It was a hug born of desperation and deep, unyielding love, a silent scream of sorrow and devotion. Lyra, seemingly sensing the depth of his emotion, the sudden torrent of feelings he couldn't articulate, rested her head against his chest. Her small form fit perfectly against him, a gesture of pure, unadulterated comfort and affection that transcended any language barrier imaginable. In that moment, surrounded by the cold steel and harsh lights of the spaceport, they were just father and child, bound by an unbreakable, impossible connection. It was a moment of unparalleled intimacy that defied the vastness of the cosmos, a shared heartbeat in an indifferent universe. His world, once so solitary and predictable, had been irrevocably changed by this small, jade-skinned alien girl. He clung to her, savoring the warmth, the impossible reality of her fragile embrace. Exhausted by the emotional surge and the day's events, Lyra finally succumbed to sleep in Cale's arms, her breath soft and even against his chest. He held her close for a few precious moments, savoring the delicate weight of her small body, inhaling the faint, sweet scent that was uniquely hers. Her luminous skin pulsed gently, a tiny, steady beacon of life in the quiet, charged atmosphere of the cargo bay. This fragile peace was a stark contrast to the tumult in Cale's heart, a silent farewell already beginning its painful pull. He committed every detail of the moment to memory, knowing it might be a long time, if ever, before he held her like this again. The feel of her tiny fingers still clutched around the smooth river stone, a testament to their improbable bond. Jax, a silent observer to the raw, unfiltered emotion, remained perfectly still. His weathered face, usually creased with cynicism, held an expression of profound understanding. He had seen many things in his long, shadowy career, but the pure, overwhelming love radiating from Cale was a rare and powerful sight, even for him. He offered Cale a gentle, comforting nod, a silent acknowledgement of the depth of the bond he had just witnessed, a wordless assurance that he understood the gravity of the parting. There was no need for explanations or platitudes. Some connections spoke louder than any words. With a heavy heart, Cale carefully, reluctantly, began to adjust his grip. He gently placed Lyra, still deeply sleeping, into the secure transport. The padded interior cradled her small form, a temporary cocoon on her journey to a new, safer life. He lingered for a moment, his hand resting on her head, a silent blessing, a final touch. Then, with a sigh that felt like it came from the very depths of his soul, he stepped back. Jax, respecting the finality of the moment, closed the hatch, a soft hiss of compressed air sealing Lyra away. The heavy plating clicked into place, a definitive, echoing sound that carved a hollow space in Cale's chest. The transport's engine hummed to life, a low thrum that vibrated through the deck. Cale watched as the vehicle slowly, almost ceremonially, pulled away, disappearing into the perpetual twilight of the Xylos spaceport. He stood there for a long time, the cold metal of the cargo bay pressing against his back, feeling an emptiness he hadn't experienced in years. The silence of his ship, once a comforting solitude, now felt deafening, vast, and unbearable. It was as if a part of him had been torn away, leaving an aching void where Lyra's warmth had been. Every shadow seemed deeper, every hum of the ship's system sharper, mocking his sudden profound loneliness. He ran a hand over his face, feeling the wetness of his own tears, a testament to the raw emotion that had just consumed him. Despite the profound pain of separation, Cale felt a renewed sense of purpose beginning to solidify within him. It was a purpose born from Lyra's trust, from the word "Dad" that still echoed in his ears. He now had an implicit mission: to ensure Lyra's safety, even from a distance. He trusted Jax. The old smuggler had a strange but unwavering code, and his word, once given, was as good as gold. Jax would get her to the sanctuary. Cale had given Lyra his good luck stone. Now, he would dedicate his life to being her good luck. This wasn't an ending. It was merely the beginning of a different journey, a father's journey, one that would lead him wherever Lyra needed him, whenever she needed him. Cale resumed his trucking routes, but his former routine, once a comforting rhythm of solitude, was now irrevocably changed. Every empty space in his ship, every silent moment on the bridge or in his cabin, reminded him acutely of Lyra. The Stardust Drifter, once his sanctuary, now felt like a hollow shell, an echo chamber for his longing. He found himself unconsciously leaving Lyra's compartment door slightly ajar, a small, futile gesture against the crushing silence. The gentle humming of the ship's engines, once a lullaby, now seemed to mock him with its lack of small, melodic alien sounds. He'd catch himself glancing towards the co-pilot's chair, half expecting to see her small form, or reaching for a ration bar to offer her, only to remember she wasn't there. The universe, once a boundless expanse for his solitary travels, now felt vast and cold without her presence. Subtle, yet profound, changes began to manifest in Cale. He was still the grizzled, stoic trucker, his hands calloused, his gaze distant, but a new, almost imperceptible warmth had entered his demeanor. His eyes, though still sharp, held a softer quality, a quiet introspection born from unexpected paternal love. He was more observant now, noticing the small, vulnerable details in the faces of the weary dock hands, the anxious expressions of families huddled in spaceport terminals, the quiet struggles of others he encountered during his long hauls. A burgeoning empathy, previously buried under layers of self-preservation and routine, slowly began to unfurl within him. He found himself offering a kind word to a struggling rookie pilot, or sharing a meal with a lonely customs agent, small gestures that would have been unthinkable before Lyra. Weeks crawled by, each day a quiet testament to his enduring ache. Then, a coded message, tucked discreetly within a routine cargo manifest update, pinged into his console. It was from Jax. Cale's heart leaped into his throat as he isolated the encrypted text, his fingers trembling slightly as he deciphered it. The message was brief, direct, and filled with an overwhelming sense of relief. Package delivered. Safe and sound. Thriving. Heard she asks about Dad. Cale slumped back in his chair, a ragged breath escaping his lips. Overwhelming relief washed over him, a tidal wave that almost buckled his knees. She was safe. Lyra was safe. But immediately following the relief came a profound ache of longing, a sharp, physical pain in his chest. He closed his eyes, picturing her luminous face, hearing her soft, melodic voice utter that single, impossibly perfect word. He knew, deep in his soul, that he had made the right choice. Her safety, her future, was paramount, transcending his own selfish desire to have her near. Yet, the pain of separation was real, a constant, gnawing void that no amount of logic or reason could lessen. He had given her a chance at a life, but at what cost to his own newly awakened heart? A new goal, sharp and clear, began to form in Cale's mind, coalescing from the lingering ache and the fierce love he felt. He started saving every credit, hoarding his earnings with a newfound fanaticism. He took on longer, more dangerous routes, hauling volatile chemicals through unstable asteroid fields, delivering sensitive data through pirate-infested sectors, accepting any job that promised a higher payout, no matter the risk. His new mission was simple: earn enough. Earn enough to visit Lyra at the sanctuary, even if it was just for a brief, clandestine reunion. He knew it wouldn't be easy. The sanctuary was remote, its location a closely guarded secret, and his visits would undoubtedly be frowned upon, perhaps even forbidden, to maintain its security. But he would find a way. He would work, he would save, and one day, he would see his daughter again. The Stardust Drifter, once a solitary ship, was now propelled by the unwavering purpose of a father on a silent, relentless quest. Years drifted by, marked not by calendars, but by Cale's relentless pursuit of his new purpose. The Stardust Drifter continued its silent journeys across the cosmic canvas, a lone speck against the infinite black. Cale remained a space trucker, his life still defined by cargo manifests and jump coordinates, but his focus had irrevocably shifted. He was no longer just delivering goods, he was building a future, a bridge across the stars, for Lyra. Every credit earned, every dangerous route navigated, every weary shift endured, was a brick in that foundation, a silent testament to a father's unwavering devotion. The galaxy, once a place of mundane routine, now held a deeper, more profound meaning. Cale himself had undergone a subtle yet profound transformation. The grizzled lines on his face were still present, perhaps even deeper, etched by the endless vigil and the silent sacrifice. He was still a rugged, solitary figure, his movements economical, his words few. Yet, there was a noticeable softening around his eyes, a flicker of warmth that hadn't been there years ago. A sense of quiet determination now permeated his demeanor, replacing the weary acceptance that had once defined him. He had become even more resourceful, more adept at navigating the treacherous currents of the galactic underworld, and above all, even more discreet. His commitment to Lyra's safety had honed his instincts, making him a silent guardian in the vastness. Through sporadic, coded messages from Jax, Cale received updates on Lyra's growth and the sanctuary's success. The old smuggler, now more of an unlikely guardian himself, had become Cale's lifeline to his daughter. The sanctuary, nestled deep within the Persis arm, had flourished. It had become a beacon, a clandestine haven for many rare and vulnerable species, a symbol of hope for those deemed inconvenient or undesirable by the larger galactic powers. Jax's messages spoke of a thriving community, a place where unique lifeforms could exist free from exploitation and fear, nurtured by a collective of benevolent ex-smugglers and renegade scientists. It was everything Cale had hoped for, a true refuge. And Lyra. Lyra, now a young adolescent within her species' unique life cycle, was described as having blossomed. Jax's terse updates spoke of a being who was bright, curious, and a surprisingly quick learner. She had developed an almost preternatural understanding of her environment, her unique sensitivity to energy fluctuations proving invaluable to the sanctuary's scientific endeavors. She possessed a gentle wisdom beyond her years, often observing the complex social dynamics of the diverse species around her with an insightful gaze. She would often ask about Cale, about Dad, a detail that always sent a wave of bittersweet emotion through him, reinforcing his resolve. She was thriving, growing into the magnificent being he always knew she could be, and the knowledge filled him with quiet, profound pride. However, the peaceful existence of the sanctuary, and indeed, the delicate balance of the galaxy, was not destined to last. A new, aggressive intergalactic corporation, Omnicorp, began to expand its monolithic reach across the known sectors. Unlike the often cumbersome, bureaucratic federations, Omnicorp was a streamlined, ruthless entity driven solely by profit and expansion. Its methods were brutal, its influence far-reaching, and its ethical compass entirely absent. They specialized in resource acquisition, systematically exploiting undeveloped planets and exotic species for their unique biological properties, their vast industrial complexes churning out goods and wealth with little regard for environmental or sentient impact. Their shadow was growing, threatening to engulf even the most remote corners of the galaxy, and Cale felt a cold dread begin to creep into his heart, a premonition that this new darkness would inevitably clash with the light he had fought so hard to create for Lyra. The galaxy was about to become a much more dangerous place. Cale learned through the galactic grapevine, a tangled web of illicit comms and hushed whispers traded in dimly lit spaceport bars, that Omnicorp had developed a disturbing new area of interest. Their relentless pursuit of profit had led them to a particular focus on rare, energy-sensitive species, unique biological entities whose inherent properties could be weaponized, harvested, or otherwise exploited for their burgeoning corporate empire. He heard rumors of specialized research divisions, of extraction protocols, designed to capture and contain these beings, of their desperate attempts to replicate or synthesize what nature had painstakingly evolved over millennia. A cold dread seeped into Cale's bones. This chilling new directive felt uncomfortably close to Lyra's own unique physiology, her subtle sensitivity to energy fluctuations. The galaxy was closing in, and the sanctuary, the precious haven he had worked so hard to protect, was becoming ever more vulnerable. Then, the message came. This time, it wasn't a coded update or a casual check-in. It was a raw, desperate burst from Jax, his voice hoarse with alarm, overriding Cale's calms in a way he hadn't heard since their initial illicit deal. "They found us, Cale! Omnicorp. They discovered the sanctuary. They're planning an extraction mission. They're calling it a conservation effort, the twisted bastards." The words hammered into Cale like physical blows, each one echoing Lyra's fragile existence. "Lyra, all of them, they're in grave danger. They're sending a fleet." Cale's blood ran cold, then boiled with a sudden, searing rage. All those years, all those sacrifices, all that quiet hope, threatened by the relentless greed of a soulless corporation. Cale did not hesitate. The Stardust Drifter was mid-haul, a cargo of highly volatile plasma conduits destined for an industrial moon. Without a second thought, without a moment's consideration for the financial penalties or the wrath of his clients, he rerouted his ship. The cargo alarm blared, a shrill protest against the sudden change in trajectory, but Cale ignored it. His new mission, chosen the moment he heard Jax's desperate plea, was absolute: to rescue Lyra and the other species from Omnicorp's clutches, even if it meant risking everything he had, everything he was. The days of being a passive guardian, a distant supporter, were over. He was going to fight. He immediately contacted Jax again, establishing a secure, high-bandwidth link. Together, their voices low and urgent, they began to formulate a desperate, audacious plan. Cale would use his intimate knowledge of the treacherous deep space routes, the forgotten jump points, and the Drifter's unique modifications, discrete cloaking systems, an upgraded engine, and hidden cargo defenses, to infiltrate the sanctuary's hidden sector before Omnicorp's much larger, but slower, fleet could arrive. It would be a race against time, a desperate dash through the void, relying on Cale's decades of experience and the Drifter's surprising agility. Jax, from his end, would prepare the sanctuary for an emergency evacuation, mobilizing its defenses and its precious inhabitants. Knowing he couldn't do this alone, Cale began reaching out. He tapped into the well of favors owed, the silent debts accumulated over years of perilous runs and discreet services. He connected with a few trusted, morally ambiguous contacts in the trucking and smuggling circles, a hotshot pilot named Rix known for his daring maneuvers, a cyber specialist called Echo with a talent for bypassing any security system, and a silent, hulking mechanic named Grak who could jury-rig anything with a flick of his wrench. These were individuals who owed him favors, or, more importantly, shared his deep-seated disdain for Omnicorp's corporate ruthlessness, their predatory expansion. He painted a picture not of riches, but of a desperate cause, a fight against tyranny, appealing to the hidden spark of defiance that often burned in the hearts of those living on the fringes. Slowly, surely, he began to assemble a small, unlikely crew, a band of misfits united by a common enemy and Cale's unwavering resolve. The Stardust Drifter, no longer just a cargo vessel, was transforming into a rescue ship, ready for war. The Stardust Drifter, no longer just a cargo vessel, was transforming into a rescue ship, ready for war. The final jump was a jolt, not just to the ship but to Cale's very bones. They burst out of warp space directly into the hidden sector, alarms blaring a furious symphony of proximity warnings. Omnicorp's invasion fleet was already there, a menacing armada of sleek, dark vessels hanging like predatory birds over the sanctuary world below. Smaller assault craft, like buzzing hornets, were beginning their descent, their energy shields shimmering. Cale didn't hesitate. He slammed the Drifter into a sharp, audacious maneuver, using its massive bulk as both a shield for the sanctuary's struggling defense grid and a dangerous diversion, drawing Omnicorp's immediate fire. Rix, his adrenaline-fueled co-pilot, grinned savagely at the controls, weaving the freighter through a hail of energy blasts, while Grak cursed loudly from engineering, coaxing every last ounce of power from the overstressed engines. Echo, meanwhile, was already worming her way into Omnicorp's comms, sowing confusion and disrupting their targeting systems. Amidst the chaos, Kale's internal comms crackled. "Dad! Up here!" The voice, though older, stronger, was unmistakably Lyra's. He angled the drifter towards a cluster of natural rock formations, where Lyra, now a graceful adolescent, her luminous skin pulsing with heightened energy, stood amidst a small group of sanctuary residents. She was taller, her movements fluid and confident, but her large, obsidian eyes still held the same spark of recognition, the same fierce love. She launched herself towards him the moment the emergency hatch hissed open, rushing into his outstretched arms. It was a silent, powerful reunion, a wordless promise fulfilled. Her unique abilities, honed by years at the sanctuary, proved crucial in the escalating conflict. She seemed to feel Omnicorp's movements, sensing their attack vectors, predicting their targeting patterns with uncanny accuracy. "They're flanking left, Dad!" she'd call out, or, "Their shield generator is weak on the starboard hull of that cruiser." Her insights, relayed instantly to Rix and Echo, allowed the drifter to evade certain destruction and target Omnicorp's vulnerabilities with devastating precision. Through a desperate combination of Kale's tactical brilliance, Rix's audacious piloting, Grak's miraculous engineering, Echo's digital warfare, and Lyra's unexpected and vital contributions, Omnicorp's extraction efforts were spectacularly repelled. The sanctuary's small, outmatched defensive turrets, guided by Lyra's intuition and Echo's rerouted targeting data, found their marks. Omnicorp's lead cruiser, crippled and burning, was forced to retreat, its accompanying fleet scattering in disarray. The sanctuary was saved. The sheer audacity of Kale's defense, and the existence of such a vibrant, diverse haven, was brought to the attention of more benevolent galactic authorities, who, shamed by Omnicorp's aggression and impressed by the sanctuary's resilience, promised full protection and recognition, ensuring its future. In the aftermath, amidst the celebratory shouts of the sanctuary's community, Kale finally allowed himself to breathe. He looked at Lyra, her hand curled in his, and realized his journey had never truly been about being alone. It was about finding a family in the most unexpected place, in the most impossible of circumstances. He chose to stay at the sanctuary, his days as a lonely space trucker definitively behind him. He took on a new role, not just as a father, but as its protector and guardian, his gruff demeanor softening further with each passing day. He finally had a home, a true belonging, and a daughter whose luminous eyes mirrored the starlight he once traversed alone. Lyra, looking up at him with immense love, squeezed his hand. Her voice, now clear and strong, filled with untold affection, softly called him Dad. Once more, a full circle of their improbable, beautiful bond. Thank you for joining Kale on this incredible journey across the cosmos. If this story of courage, connection, and finding family in the vastness of space touched your heart, please remember to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments below about this human-first future tale, and don't forget to subscribe for more epic adventures and heartwarming narratives from the boundless universe. Keep an eye out for our next video, another tale of humanity's spirit in the great unknown.